What is up, guys, and welcome to July's Patreon pick video. And the topic that my patrons have picked for this one is going to be my top 10 horror movie trilogies. And while that might sound simple enough, this one was actually really difficult for a number of reasons. One, just the traditional difficulty of picking your favorites when there's a ton of awesome horror trilogies, and many of which didn't even make my top 10 that you guys are going to freak out about. Then you have the other side of it, which is the fact that very, very few horror franchises actually stopped at 3 movies. Even of the 10 that I have here, only 3 of them are what you would traditionally call a trilogy. 1 movie, 2 movie, 3 movie, and then stop. The story is done. So my one criteria that I followed as kind of a rule on how I'm going to pick these 10 is that of the 3 movies in this trilogy, you have to have a completed story. Even if there's a 4th film, a 5th film, a 6th film, a reboot, whatever, of those 3 movies, do you have a beginning, middle, and end? And can you stop there if you want to? If there was never a continuation off of that, does those 3 movies survive as a trilogy? The other tricky part is that we are almost at the culmination of a number of awesome horror duologies that are soon to become a trilogy that almost makes me wish that this topic would have came out later on. And eventually I'm sure I'll do another one, but you got the Terrifier trilogy that's about to wrap. You've got, finally, we're getting the Collected for the Collector trilogy, a number of others, 28 Days Later, finally getting the 3rd movie. So there's quite a few of those that are coming out the pipe here of the next couple of years that might easily crack this top 10 at a later date. But as of today, this is my top 10. All of these, you cannot go wrong. These are some of the best chunk of 3 films that you can have in horror. And so you ask me 2 hours from now, some of these places might change. But yeah, let me know your guys' favorite horror trilogies down in the comment section below, and we'll all debate our favorites. Now, really quick before we kick off this top 10, while you're sitting on the couch curled up with your favorite bucket of popcorn and soda, watching your favorite horror trilogy, you want to have a scent that is going to match the vibe of those movies. So check out the sponsor of today's video, Scentbird. Just like clothing choices, different scents give off different vibes and are a part of expressing your unique personality. I've always wanted to try different colognes so that I can have different scents for different occasions, or just see what brands or what scents out there I actually really like. But having to commit to buying a full bottle, which is never cheap and always runs the risk that I won't even like it, always makes me stick with the same old fragrance. Well, luckily I've found Scentbird, and they've allowed me to explore a whole new world of fragrances. This month I'm sampling 4 different fragrances, and so far my 2 favorites are Amore Cafe, which gives this really unique blend of bold coffee and very smooth vanilla, which is perfect for a nice evening out. Or when I'm in more of a sensual mood, I have Confessions of a Rebel's Get a Room, which is this apple mixed with mandarin with this nice little subdued woody finish. And with an added medley of vanilla, praline, and a little touch of spice, this one always makes my wife's heart skip a beat. By using Scentbird, you can try different fragrances for a much more affordable price than the rollers or travel size vials available in stores. Just choose your fragrances each month and avoid paying the $300 to $500 average that most pricey full-size bottles will run you just to risk not even liking it. And Scentbird's packaging makes it very easy and convenient to carry or travel with your vials. You could slide the vials in your pocket, gym bag, purse, or carry-on. And while portability sometimes gives the impression of small, the included vial is actually very generously sized. So if you're interested in discovering and expressing your personality through scent, check out Scentbird at the link below and use my code Cody Leach to get 55% off at checkout. That brings the price of your first scent down to $8, which is a steal. That's code Cody Leach at the link below to get 55% off. And thank you so much to Scentbird for sponsoring today's video. Kicking off my top 10 horror trilogies is a franchise that it almost kills me to have it at number 10, because 2 of these 3 movies are 2 of the greatest films ever made. But this is one of those situations where the 3rd film really shits the bed, and it's only because of how amazing those first 2 films that it felt like it had to be on here somewhere. And that is going to be the Alien trilogy. That's Alien, Aliens, and Alien 3. And I don't even think I really need to explain myself here. I think everybody, for the most part, at least understands where I'm coming from, even if you don't really have as much hate for Alien 3 as I do. But, you know, Ridley Scott's original film, one of the greatest sci-fi horrors ever made. You have James Cameron's follow-up in Aliens, which is absolutely one of my personal favorites of all time. It is my favorite of this franchise. And then you have Alien 3.
the fuck is that?
Which, if I could remove my emotions from the first 5 minutes of the film, there are redeeming qualities about it. You know, you still have David Fincher as a director here, even though he denounces the film for understandable reasons. So there is a lot of competent filmmaking. There's some very dark, bleak, interesting things going on. But as a cap off to the end of this trilogy narratively, I hate what this movie does. I can watch it and be fine. It's not like watching Freddy's Dead, where I would rather spend my 90 minutes doing anything else. But yeah, you leave off Aliens with Newt and Hicks. You start off Alien 3 with them dying in the opening credits in their sleep. I'll never get over that. But anyway, the Alien trilogy, I mean, we were talking about the xenomorph creation, when you're talking about the blend of horror and action between those first two films, some of the most memorable characters of all time, one of, if not most people's favorite final girl and badass femme fatale of the entire horror and sci-fi genre. I mean, there's so many things about those first two films that are iconic. And we've got Alien Romulus coming here very soon, which they're another one right there. You know, maybe I should have waited till after Alien Romulus and you would have those three as a trilogy, since that technically takes place, I think, between those first two films. So I don't know. Maybe we'll revisit this here in a couple of weeks and I'll be able to put this a little higher. But the Alien films are great. Just Alien 3. God, Alien 3. Coming at number 9 for me is going to be the Evil Dead trilogy, which would be the original Evil Dead, Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn, and then, of course, Army of Darkness. And what I really like about this trilogy, no one of those three films are in like my top 50 horror films of all time. I'm actually, my favorite is actually the Fede Alvarez film. That's my Evil Dead film that I really hold close to the chest. But I enjoy these first three Evil Dead films quite a bit. And what I enjoy about them as a trilogy is that they're so different. You have the original, which is very much this low budget, almost like student film style, with Sam Raimi really showing his chops as a director and his humor and the extreme amounts of gore. And what I like about it is, as silly as it is, it's a genuinely creepy movie. And it just really kind of invented that whole cabin in the woods subgenre in a way that most people would say never really matched what Sam Raimi brought to it. Then you have Evil Dead 2, which is by a landslide most people's favorite Evil Dead film, and I'm one of those weirdos where it's actually my least favorite Evil Dead film, while still being a movie that I enjoy overall. But that one's very much a mix of what I would call splatstick, where you have the huge amounts of gore with like total slapstick humor. And so that one stands out quite a bit. And then you have Army of Darkness, which is basically full-blown humor. It's a comedy with just a little bit of horror elements in there. And I've enjoyed the hell out of that one ever since I was a kid. So as a trilogy, if you're watching through these three films, it's actually a really refreshing experience because the pace and the tone has changed throughout to where you really don't feel like you're just kind of eating the same meal over and over again. So I really enjoy these. I felt like they had to be on here somewhere. They are a little bit low on the list just because none of these three individual films are really on my top 10 or top 20, but as a trilogy, I highly enjoy what it brings. Coming in at number 8 is going to be the Hannibal trilogy, starring Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. So you've got Silence of the Lambs, you have Hannibal, and you have Red Dragon. And of those three, Hannibal is the weak link there. That's the other thing that's really difficult and interesting about this list, is that a lot of great horror trilogies out there tend to have that weak link that's really just being dragged up by the quality of the other films. So that's what's going to throw these rankings into just absolute chaos in the comment section as well. So Hannibal here, you have The Silence of the Lambs, absolutely one of the greatest movies ever made. And it's one of the few horror films that got Oscar love. Even to this day, even with horror in the state that it is, where it's getting a lot more respect, we're still not at the fucking Oscars, you bitches. Nonetheless, Silence of the Lambs, one of the greatest movies of all time, one of the greatest performances of all time from Anthony Hopkins in Hannibal Lecter. Of course, you got Clarice Starling, who's iconic in her own right as well. Buffalo Bill. So many things about that one film that just makes it just an absolute cinematic classic. You have Hannibal, which is fine. You know, one of Ridley Scott's weaker movies for sure. There's memorable moments in it. It's got an eerie vibe. It goes for a lot more of the gore factor here. And I don't know. I've seen it numerous times. I saw it in the theater with my dad back when it came out, and it's just never really been a movie that's fully worked for me, but it's fine. And then you have Red Dragon, which certainly has its issues. You know, there's a lot of people that prefer Manhunter. They prefer that Michael Mann version, even though it doesn't have Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. But I like Red Dragon quite a bit. I feel like it gets overhated. I really like, of course, just seeing the beginning of Anthony Hopkins' version of Hannibal Lecter here, but also you have the Tooth Fairy killer here and Ralph Fiennes, who I think is effectively creepy. You also have the lead detective here, Will Graham, who's played by Edward Norton, who's, of course, great playing off of Anthony Hopkins. So, yes, while this is a movie that, if you're a big Manhunter fan, kind of feels like a shot-for-shot remake that we didn't necessarily need, I think that it's necessary to kind of have this full circle of Anthony Hopkins' take on that character. So I really enjoy the two films in the ends there, the sandwich of them. Hannibal being, I guess, the canonical ending of this trilogy. Not my favorite, but fine. But overall, definitely a trilogy that I hold close, and that I really look forward to at some point here soon doing a Hannibal review series. I feel like that's one that I haven't done that's kind of surprising that I haven't done. Coming in at number 7, which shouldn't be a dark horse, but absolutely is, because I don't see people talk about it very often, and that is the Psycho trilogy. Now, we did have a fourth film that was a TV movie, but Psycho 3 leaves off in a way where you could cap off the trilogy, cap off the story of Norman Bates there, and it'd feel like a very appropriate ending. But, of course, you have Alfred Hitchcock's original, which most people beloved as one of the greatest movies ever made. I really like it. I would say I appreciate it more than I enjoy it. It's just one of those movies that I feel like I kind of came to it too late. It was already kind of a pop culture mainstay where everybody knew every important piece of this film before I ever got a chance to actually watch it and appreciate it. But, of course, very good movie. My personal favorite, you have Psycho 2, which I think is one of the greatest and certainly most underappreciated sequels of all time, that's written by Tom Holland and just does a really fascinating thing with not only the legacy of Psycho, but the fact that they made it like 20 years later. And you think on paper somebody's making a sequel to Alfred Hitchcock's film, and you just assume it's going to be garbage. And that really works to the advantage of Psycho 2 when you finally watch it. So such a good movie, one of my favorites. And Psycho 3, definitely the weakest of the three, but a really solid movie. Like, all four of the Psycho movies, honestly, are solid. Even the fourth one, which is easily the weakest, the TV film, which is part prequel, part sequel, that one is very watchable. But Psycho 3, it's fun. This one was directed by Anthony Perkins, and you could see some talent there. You could see some of the amateurish decisions there with what he did with the story. But you have the nun character in here, which is very interesting, bringing in a romance for Norman. You've got the guy with the guitar, who's kind of one of those corny slasher characters that just stands out for all the wrong reasons. Still got some pretty solid kills in there, and an ending that I think it's interesting. The second film ends with a bit of a twist of what you understand of the first film, and the third film ends with a bit of a twist on what you thought you understood from the second film. So those three movies back to back, really solid experience. And I think that Psycho as a franchise, everybody loves the original, but Psycho as a franchise, very underrated franchise in horror, very underrated series of movies. Coming in at number 6, and we have the Scream trilogy. And this is another one that was kind of difficult because you have two great movies back to back with Scream 1 and Scream 2. And then you got Scream 3, which is very solid, but certainly drags down these three movies quite a bit. But as a trilogy, I think that they're pretty damn solid. I've said for years, if Scream 3 is the worst movie that you have in your franchise, which I don't know, Scream 6 gave it a run for its money, but Scream 3 or Scream 6, if that's your worst film in your franchise, you're doing pretty fucking good. So you have Scream here, which of course just absolutely blew the doors off in the middle of the 90s for slashers and for horror, and kind of created this resurgence. Scream 2, for coming out a year later, I have always really enjoyed that sequel. And I'm one of those people that actually really enjoys the killer reveals more than most, and I like how they kind of ramp things up a bit, and it's just a really fun 1-2 punch. And then Scream 3, despite its weaknesses, still a very fun movie, still a very enjoyable movie. You still get some pretty decent kills in there. You still get some good moments with Sydney, especially. She's the best part of this, her just being tired of Ghostface's shit. And, it cements her easily in my mind as one of, if not the best, slasher final girl. And, a little wackiness in there with the thing with the mom and the ghost stuff, and then having her brother be revealed. But, it's fine. For Scream movies, for some of the inherent silliness of those films while trying to remain grounded, it's not bad. So it's just a trilogy of films that I always get a lot of enjoyment of. And I can watch all 6 of the Scream films, despite my issues with most of them, and I could just have a really good, solid time and not feel like I'm getting sick of watching those. One of those slasher franchises that always keeps things fun and fresh and always keeps things entertaining. So really good trilogy. Coming in at number 5, and now shit gets complicated because Halloween tends to complicate everything. So the weird thing about the Halloween franchise is that this is a series of slashers that is kind of a choose your own adventure. You could give probably 7 different answers for your favorite Halloween trilogy because things start and stop and go off into different timelines and have alternate views, like all throughout those, what do we got, 13 of those movies now? And so basically what I did here is I just picked my favorite timeline of movies. You could say, I'm sure some people could make an argument that Halloween 1, 2, and Season of the Witch is a trilogy. You have a hard time arguing that with me, despite somebody who loves Halloween 3. You would have people that say the Thorn trilogy, 4, 5, and 6. You have people that would say the David Gordon Green trilogy. You would have people doing the Choose Your Adventure of 1, 2, and 4, or 1, 2, and Halloween 2018, and you could stop. And so it's one of those weird series of movies where you really could have about 7 or 8 different answers when you're talking about Halloween. But the one that I'm going with, which is my personal favorite, is going to be the H2O timeline. So Halloween 1978, Halloween 2 from 1981, and then Halloween H2O. And to me, that 1, 2, 3 punch right there is the best 3 stories put together of the entire Halloween franchise for my money. Halloween H2 has a lot of flaws. I mean, Halloween H2O's got the mask debacle. A lot of people compare it to Scream, saying it's more of a Scream movie than a Halloween film. I've never quite been on that train, but I see the point, with the style of it. You've got the performance of Chris Durand. And I don't think he's a bad Michael Myers, but he's a lot of people's, least favorite. But what I love about it is that for the character of Laurie, those 3 films are a really cohesive trilogy for her character arc. You got the first film where she's the innocent babysitter, just happens to be a survivor. You have the second film, which is later on that night, her being stalked even more and going through even more trauma. And then the third film shows the aftermath of what it has done to her as a person and as a parent. And then in the third act of H2O, she decides that she's done being a victim. She's done being chased, and she's taken the fight to Michael and chops his fucking head off. And, to hell with Halloween Resurrection and everything they did to undo all of that. That movie does not fucking exist in my mind when I talk about H2O. If you just think of those 3 movies as a beginning, middle, and end, really, really solid trilogy. And for me, when I am in the mood to watch Halloween, when I'm in the mood to, have a Michael Myers experience, these 3 films back to back, more times than not, is what I'm going to watch to get my Michael Myers fix. Coming in at number 4 for me is going to be the Blade trilogy. And here we are again with 2 fantastic movies and 1 arguable shit bomb. I have a lot of fun with Blade Trinity, but it's for a lot of the wrong reasons. It's definitely a guilty pleasure for me, but I absolutely love Blade. I love the character of Blade. I love the style of it. So you have the first film that's much more like this dark, almost like seedy noir movie with a bunch of martial arts action, and you got Stephen Dorff as a really good villain here in Frost, and the introduction of the character, like the opening of that movie is one of my favorite openings to a movie of all time, and just really, really kick-ass film that while a lot of us didn't know it was a comic book film when we watched it, we just went to go see a Wesley Snipes vampire action film. It is one of those movies that doesn't get the credit it deserves for kind of the beginning of the comic book craze that we are in now as far as movies. Then you have Blade 2, which I think is even better than the original. The action, with the exception of some of the rubbery CGI, is ramped up a bit. You have the Reaper vampires, which are totally terrifying and one of the coolest vampire designs ever. I love the rivalry between Blade and the Night Stalkers, or is it the Day Stalkers? Fuck, I don't remember. The name of the group with Ron Perlman. Mostly just him and Ron Perlman, if I'm going to be honest. The rivalry between those two. You've got Norman Reedus in here as kind of a little scummy character, which is fun. Even though it's absolute bullshit, I love the fact that, once we get past the logic of it, we have the return of Whistler. And so a movie where Whistler is much more involved in all the action. Just one of my favorite movies of all time. And then, of course, Blade Trinity, which, yeah, it brings it down quite a bit. For some people, it's so bad that they're going to be puzzled at why it's on this list, let alone at number 4. But I still have fun with that film. I have fun with it for the things that it genuinely does good. I do think that the chemistry there between Wesley Snipes and Ryan Reynolds and Jessica Biel is pretty good. You have Ryan Reynolds doing kind of his prototype Deadpool thing, which is a lot of fun. I think that there are still some really standout moments in some of the action and some of the vampire horror, but then you got a lot of goofy shit. You got a lot more weird humor. We get our version of Dracula here, which you would think Dracula in the Blade universe should be a much bigger deal than this movie actually makes of it, which I like Dominic Purcell a lot as an actor. I wish he would get better roles, but not great in this movie. And, of course, some of the CGI going on here is also not very good, even worse than it was in Blade 2. And then all the behind-the-scenes madness where, whether it was the director or Wesley Snipes losing their mind or, a combination of both, it's a miracle the movie was as good as it was with all the crazy hijinks that you can listen to Patton Oswalt or anybody else talk about that went on during the making of that film. But I love me vampires. I love me some Blade. And despite that anchor that Blade Trinity is trying to drag this trilogy down, I love the first two so much that it's this high for me. It's my number 4. And now we have arrived at the top 3. Now, before I even get into revealing what my top 3 are, I need to speak about a trilogy that I'm sure is going to feel like a glaring omission to a lot of people who are watching this list. And that is John Carpenter's unofficial Apocalypse trilogy, which starts with The Thing, and then you have Prince of Darkness, and then concludes with In the Mouth of Madness. And the reason why I didn't include this is because of what I'm ranking these trilogies off of as far as continuity and being this concluding story of 3 films and watching them together. That trilogy just doesn't make sense within this list of movies and how I'm ranking these. The Thing, as a lot of you know, is my favorite horror film of all time. I absolutely adore In the Mouth of Madness, and I like Prince of Darkness. It's never been one of my favorites, so you would think that would at least be in my top 3, maybe even my number 1 if I was just grading them off of the 3 individual films. But that's why they call it an unofficial trilogy. There's really nothing that ties those 3 films together other than John Carpenter saying that they're, an unofficial trilogy, that they're just 3 different versions of an apocalypse. So if that's frustrating for some of you, I apologize. It really just kind of hurt my brain putting it on here and trying to figure out where I'm going to put it when there are 3 completely different movies that I never watch as a trilogy. I've never once put on all 3 of those movies and just watched them. The Thing is something I watch by itself when I'm in the mood for The Thing, and same with In the Mouth of Madness. I really only watch Prince of Darkness if I'm just in a John Carpenter mood, but that's the reason why the Apocalypse trilogy is not on here. If it's going to be included on your list because you're grading these in a different little criteria than I am, totally fair, but that is why. Coming in at number 3 for me is the newest addition to this list, and that is going to be Ty West's X trilogy. And I'm just over the moon about these 3 movies. I know they're not for everybody. There's a lot of people that do not like X whatsoever. There's a lot of people that do not like Pearl whatsoever. There's a lot of people that really did not like Maxine, and that's totally fair, but I'm thankful that all 3 of them very much work for me. X being my favorite of them. X is probably my favorite horror film that's been released over the last 3 or 4 years. And so this trilogy really came out of nowhere. That's part of the reason why I'm so over the moon about it, because it's nothing that we expected. It's not an IP. It's not something that was really advertised. We just walked into this film X, which I had no expectations for. And the only expectations I did have, if I had them, was that I was probably not going to like it because it was A24. Absolutely loved it. Then I find out, we already got a prequel shot that's going to talk about the main villain. Oh my God, that's awesome. Got it the same year. And then this year we had the culmination in Maxine, which was my most anticipated film of the year all the way up until its release. And, while there were certainly some things about it that I took issue with, it wasn't like a knock out of the park. It's not overtaken X for me, not even close. I really enjoyed Maxine. I really enjoyed what it brought. And for me, I thought it was a very good conclusion to this trilogy. So to me, I gave all 3 of these films a 4 out of 5 or more. I have already rewatched the 2 that I have at home numerous times, and I'm probably going to watch Maxine numerous times once that hits home release. And it's just 3 movies that I think are all fantastic, tell this cohesive story, have cohesive themes, and it's just unlike anything else that we have in this genre. It's not just a character that was popular, so we just kept making more. It's just a thing in and of itself. And so I absolutely love the X trilogy. And, while some of it might be recency bias, sure, maybe if we do this list here in the next, 3 years or so, maybe it'll go down on the list a little bit, but it's always going to be in my top 10 because I just think it's a fantastic collection of movies that I'm shocked worked for me as well as they did. And now coming in at my top 2, I apologize for boring everybody with the same old predictable answer from Cody. Unless you're just following me for the first time or this is your first video, then welcome. You're about to hear something that you're probably going to hear a lot more on this channel. But sometimes when you talk about certain rankings, especially in horror, it's hard to escape your favorites unless you just choose not to include them, and then that creates a whole other list of problems. So coming in at number 2 for me is going to be Nightmare on Elm Street. But just like with Halloween, I have to cheat a little bit because this is not the first 3 films, because those first 3 films are a continuity nightmare. You have the first film, then you have the second film, which feels like it doesn't follow anything from the first film, and it barely is connected to any of those characters or stories. And I have my enjoyment with 2. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to shit on 2, but 2 makes no sense in the middle of 1 and Dream Warriors. So this is going to be Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, and then concluding with Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Dream Master. And even though we got Dream Child and everything that continues off of 4 does end in a way where you could say that's the end of the story. Obviously we knew it wasn't because Freddy was a fucking juggernaut, but if we live in a weird alternate reality where Alice and it was her boyfriend Dean, is that his name? Can't remember. Alice and boyfriend are walking away from that fountain, and then the music starts. That could be the end. That could be a culmination of it all. That could be the conclusion. But yeah, I'm a Freddy whore. I just come by it honestly. I'm sorry. I'm a Freddy whore, and so it's hard to escape my favorite film franchise. And you have the first film, which is one of the greatest horror films of all time that I don't really need to even elaborate on it because I've talked about it ad nauseum. You got Dream Warriors, which is my personal favorite and easily one of my favorite films of all time. And then you have 4, which certainly has its issues. It's easily the weakest of the 3 that I'm including here, but I still have a lot of fun with 4. And 4 was very important to me. I think that was actually the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie I watched. I don't remember it as vividly as I do a franchise that we're going to talk about here at number 1. But 4, I'm fairly certain, is the one that I watched that made me go, oh, what is this? What is this character in these sets of movies that we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these sitting on the shelf? Oh, cool. And so as a kid, for the longest time, 4 was my favorite, probably because it was the flashiest and it was most colorful, and it was like that MTV generation, and some of the humor worked better for me as a kid because it's a lot goofier. But yeah, those 3 movies, I mean, if I'm going to include Nightmare on Elm Street on this list, to me, that's the only trilogy that makes sense to me. And yeah, absolute bias for my favorites, but what are you going to do? And then at number 1, we have Child's Play, of course. And this is the first 3 films. We have a continuity here that is very unique, that has never been broken. There's no reboots, there's no alternate timelines, there's no disregarding previous movies. Don Mancini has kept this thing consistently the same characters, the same timeline from the original film all the way through to his 3 seasons of his TV show. And I'm sure that's the way it's always going to be until Chucky ends at some point. But the first film, the second film, the third film, kind of like the Andy trilogy, if you will. I mean, for me, there are 3 of my favorite films of all time, and 3 films that are some of the most important movies of all time to me. The first one, directed by Tom Holland's an absolute 80s classic. You have a really good, it's very unique in the franchise that it kind of holds back on Chucky a bit. Chucky is a reveal in the movie, and Chucky is something that is kind of, you're not quite sure what is going on. Is Andy actually the killer? Is it something in his mind? Like, if you watch it without any knowledge that this is a franchise, it does play with you a little bit. Then you get Child's Play 2, where it's my favorite of the franchise and one of my favorite films of all time, where Chucky's fully realized, and he gets to kind of go off the deep end and just full one-liners and everything like that. And a great third act as well. And then you have Child's Play 3, which a lot of people don't like, and I've never understood it. Child's Play 3 is an absolute favorite of mine, and it was my first horror film. This is a movie that I, to this day, vividly remember the first time that I watched it, and it made me obsessed with Chucky, and then turned into, a gateway drug over to Nightmare on Elm Street, and then I just loved horror. And so, I mean, these two franchises that I just talked about, it's the reason why I'm talking to you today. And it's the reason why I'm such a rabid horror fan and decided to turn a camera on and talk about it one day when I was fucking 26. So, I mean, it's boring. It's a predictable answer for sure. And sometimes that disappoints me when I wish I could throw in some curveballs there, but it would be a lie. It would be a lie. Child's Play and Nightmare on Elm Street have to be my number one and number two because they're so important to me. You know, they're some of those movies that literally shaped me as a movie fan. So coming at number one is my boy Chucky with Child's Play. Well, that's it for this one, guys. Be sure to check out Scentbird down in the video description below so that you have the right scent for any situation that you might find yourself in. If you enjoyed that video and you want to check out some more, I got all my 2024 new release reviews here, and I'm going to put a playlist of my tier list videos up here as well where I've covered a few of these franchises. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.